A lot has been said about Celine Song's Materialists, that it has no plot or that it lacks emotional interiority in the central romance. But here's the counter take. Materialists might actually be the rom-com update we needed for the dating economy we live in now. Join the conversation and please subscribe to my channel Eve's Critique and drop your take. We feature the best comment and future videos and video essays on film, culture, and all the good stuff. Before anything else, we need to understand the premise. Materialist starts with a simple, brutally contemporary question. Is today's romantic marketplace? Do we choose people or portfolios? In New York, where everything has a price and almost nothing has a guarantee, we follow a matchmaker, Lucy, played by Dakota Johnson, at the height of her technical skill, someone who has turned love into service. She knows the algorithms. She masters the choreography of a first date. At work, she pairs profiles with the precision of someone reading balance sheets, who later will become a problem. In her private life, though, she still doubts about what love is, when her ex, John, played by Chris Evans, suddenly returns while at the same time she meets a millionaire, played by Pedro Pascal, known as a unicorn in her business. So the premise is the friction between compatibility and desire, rationality, and what love should make her feel despite the data. The film then works as a mirror of our time. Apps, curation, and fit have turned romance into product. But Materialists twist the genre. It refuses to ease catharsis of a rain-run finale and instead forces us to face the price of our choices through a more adult lens. Money isn't set dressing, it's a character. It defines rhythm, who has time to love, environment, who has access to which places, and above all, power. Who sets the terms of a conversation, who yields, who chooses. And it's precisely because the film often feels contained, cold, almost museum-like, that its premise becomes more uncomfortable. What if love that fits your life you want to buy doesn't fit the person you are? But what's the story then, you might ask? It's the story of someone who, by profession, organizes other people's dreams, and now has to decide whether to follow the perfect script or accept the mess of the real life. And in that friction between what gives us stability and what gives us meaning, the film finds its truth. Maybe that's why so many say there's no plot or like its interiority, because what's at stake here isn't a sequel of events, but the invisible cost of decisions. The action is in micro-gestures, pauses, choices of setting, conversations that shift by a centimeter and withdraw the entire emotional map. But she refuses the sugar rush that uses to choose the deal. The rain-run confession, the swirling score, the moral of the story wrapped up in a kiss. The trailer even flirted with that classic promise, 90s rom-com sparkle and superstars, which is why some viewers walked in expecting champagne bubbles. Vanilla literally framed the drop as A24's bring back their 19s rom-com. The rhythms are lighter than a straight drama, but the engine under the hood isn't fantasy, it's accounting. Not numbers of their own sake, but accounting in the broader sense. Who pays, who owes, who risks, and who absorbs the cost of others' dream. In place of a rom-com, gives you microtransaction of power, a glance where the checks arrives, a party where the starter floats between bodies like perfume. The script keeps the witty scaffolding but swaps the thesis. Love in the city is negotiated, not just discovered. That's why the movie feels spickier and sadder than its packaging. The marketing invites us to remember the fizzy 1990s version of a New York romance, and the film answers with post-2008 economics, the era where rent, debt, and career volatility become permanent, not temporary obstacles. The rom-com once asked, "Will they or won't they?" Song updates it to, "Can they afford to?" Not only financially, but existentially. Can they afford the cost, time, and starter ambition, the erosion of self that sometimes comes with partnership? Crucially, Song preserves the genre's pleasures of the city glow because the pleasures are real, but they refuses to let these pleasures launder the math. The refusal changes the shape of scenes. Jokes land, but they land with aftertaste. A kiss happens, but it doesn't settle the bill. Even in press conversations around release, Song and her cast kept steering the discourse between money as a dramatic force and the way modern dating behaves like a marketplace. Exactly the tension the film plays out. That's a crucial conversation to have right now. So could Materialists actually be a reformed 90s rom-com? Because the audience has changed. We're fluent with apps, fees, feed scores, and side hustles. We know that what looks like romance can be logistics disguised as feeling. The classic rom-com relies us on that way. Someone sprinted in the rain and the universe forgave all that. Song's move is riskier. She lets the doubt remain visible and asks if intimacy can still grow with the ledger on the table. That visibility produces a new kind of suspense. Not will he catch the taxi, but will they name the price out loud and still choose each other? So when people say the movie's cool, controlled, even museum-like, read that restraint as a craft strategy. In other words, Materialist stress tests the rom-com. It proves the genre can carry modern life with all precarity, class performance, and time scarcity, without charm or a nice song about how love makes us forget everything in the background. Song invites us to step into the theater for the nostalgia. It leaves you with the bill that we are always paying and gives us something rare, recognition. And that's why it's still worth watching, not to see the old rom-com playbook, but to witness an experiment. How do you stage love when love becomes a spreadsheet? How do you film the negotiation between desire and utility without falling into cynicism or fantasy? Materialists pose the question, stretches the discomfort, and exposes the ethic behind every yes and every no. If you're willing to play this game, fewer fireworks, more nuance, the film gives back something rare, an honest mirror of our priorities. A friend of mine walked out disappointed because he expected a classic rom-com arc. Think Notting Hill, When Harry Meets Sally, 13 Going on 30, even the storm-kissed DNA of The Notebook. Materialists doesn't play that game, and the trailer and some marketing may have nudged expectations in that direction. Instead, Song builds a story that feels like real dating in 2025. More spreadsheets than fairy tale, more quiet recalibration than grand gesture. Song gives us a mirror for how people actually date now, optimizing for fit, status, and security. Lucy thinks in numbers, outcomes, and risk, until these metrics collide with messy human needs. Money is a side topic. It's an active character in every decision. That's unromantic on paper and precisely why it's interesting on screen. Is that cynical or just honest about the way dating apps, rent, and careers shape desire? If you've seen personal finance breakdowns, I highly recommend this video from Financial Diet on her thoughts about how whether the film is a broke guy propaganda or not. Although I might agree with her on how the film's it's a broke guy propaganda, I also believe that's not the heart of Materialists, because it's also what money stands for: safety, agency, and time. Whether the calculus is perfectly accurate matters less than the uncomfortable question it forces. Are we choosing people or portfolios? If you wanted operatic catharsis, Materialists might feel restrained. The film's tension sits into micro-expressions and power shift, not meat-cute fireworks. It's a vibe closer to adult romance drama with witty rom-com DNA, performed by Dakota Johnson, Pedro Pascal, and Chris Evans, a trio whose chemistry some critics say wobbles, but whose dynamic makes the ethics of choosing widely legible. That debate alone makes it worth your watch, because it's a conversation starter about love, class, and choice, staged as a sleek New York story with the observational sharpness you'd expect from the director of Past Lives. Even when it sidesteps big swoons payoffs, it news something truer: how modern romance is negotiable, priced, and then sometimes felt away. Here's what feels singular about Celine Song in Materialists. She directs attention, not just actors. The film lives in those micro intervals where faces recalibrate and actually say something, rather than just give us a time to think about our everyday lives. Song is unusually patient with these moments. She lets the look do the line reading and lets the pause be the plot, not restrained in where the film's electricity comes from. Instead, it tossing us the answer. She gives us time to notice it materialize between the characters. Song uses negative space as a third character. The space between the two people becomes a graph of power. Even the diegetic sounds, forks, the elevator's breath arrive like little metronomes of tension. There's no need to declare feeling when the rom-com is already vibrating with it. That's why the cringe little feeling of falling into something without saying anything lands so hard. Song understands that infatuation in adult life rarely announces itself with fireworks. It shows up as interference. She captures that interference with care, which is what is rare nowadays in cinema. She says that love is the slow accumulation of tiny correct readings over time. Knowing what silence means, knowing which smile is an armor, knowing that I'm fine is a flare. Song films that knowing with tenderness, and crucially without sentimentality. And here's the quiet miracle. None of this is flamboyant, it's precise. She trusts the actors to hold tension without underlying it, and she trusts us to read it without having to circle in red. That's the brilliance of Materialists. Song makes a movie about money and still proves that the most valuable thing on screen can't be bought. She turns looks into lines, silences into scenes, and let us witness a kind of connections that resists optimization. In a world obsessed with metrics, she gives us something stubbornly immeasurable and films it with the kind of attention that feels itself like care.